Hi everyone, and welcome to our First Class Learning podcast series. Today we are going to be talking about why we are the fastest growing tuition franchise in the UK. We are actually recording from a real life tuition centre, so please bear with us if there is any strange background noises. I'm Ray Corder. I've been a centre manager for 4 years now, and I'm joined today by James, Ainit and Shanti, my guests. So if you could just introduce yourself, James, tell us a little bit about your relationship with First Class Learning.
Sure. So I run a centre in the sort of Bristol area. So my background is teaching, secondary mathematics, and I've been running a centre for about 1.5 years.
Shanti?
So Ian and my husband, we've both been running First Class Learning for 13 years now, and we're based in the Leicester area.
And Ainit, your background in teaching as well?
Yeah, well, yes, qualified teacher in 98. I only taught for a couple of years, and then we started First Class Learning in sort of 2010. So I had a bit of a break from teaching, but I wanted to get back into it, but not get in the classroom. So First Class Learning was a great opportunity.
Excellent. So we're going to jump into questions that we often get asked by people starting to join on new centre managers. Broad questions to start with. Why is First Class Learning probably more effective than most other tuition methods? So we're looking at whether some are online, we're all materials based, learning path based, the whole thing. So why do we think we're sort of more effective?
I'm happy to kick off.
Okay.
I suppose for me, right at the beginning, I was looking at all the different options that were available for me in terms of franchises. And one of the things that certainly jumped out as a teacher was its links to the national curriculum. That was really important to me.
Yeah.
I know it is to a lot of our parents. They may have specific goals and hopes that they want their children to achieve, whether that's building confidence or just getting more challenge. So for me, the resources that First Class Learning provides has that consistency and that working alongside the national curriculum, but it's also got everything you need right from the little ones in primary up to GCSE. So in terms of that scope, but also in terms of running alongside the national curriculum was really important.
Because not all tuition programmes are aligned to the UK national curriculum, are they?
No. I think the other thing is it's an individualised programme. I think that's really important, so we cater for all the children individually as well. That I think a lot of parents want that, because at school they're sitting in a classroom with 30 children all doing the same work. So there's children that are either excelling and they want to be pushed forward, or there's always the children that are left behind. But the fact that it's an individualised programme really works well.
It's also, as well as being individualised, but it's very got lots of variety to the materials as well. So I think it keeps people engaged. That's another factor, I think, why we're quite effective. And perhaps some of the other parents have approached me before saying, I've tried another tuition model, I won't name names, but it's boring and repetitive. Whereas I think our materials, we've got a lot of variety, haven't we? We've got lots of options.
I'd agree. There's a lot of flexibility as well. And what I'd say from my point of view, and following on from what Shanti was saying, is the breadth of resources is there. So if you're going to have that individualised learning programme, you need to be able to pull on lots of different modules in order to tailor make it for that pupil. Whereas if you're limited in that result, you can only draw on certain topic areas or what have you. So that scope is really important, not only for us, but more importantly for the pupils.
So I think you've obviously been established quite a few years, and it's to think about sort of how that affects the growth as well. I think the variety of materials and the structure that we have enables us to keep the students and keep them engaged. I think that's really important, isn't it? If you're starting a new business and you're losing as much as you're gaining, whereas I think, our materials, it's important to keep the existing children happy, isn't it?
Absolutely. Starts with a student, ends with a student. I mean, that's like a mantra almost, I think, for every First Class Learning centre throughout the UK. I mean, what I'd sort of say about one of the points you made about why we're the fastest growing is when me and Shanti first started, we had about 40 centres 13 years ago. There's now well over 300 centres as we speak now, and it's just growing, like you said. And the reason it's growing is because each centre is doing so well, and the reason each centre is doing so well is because we're treating each student in a unique, individualised way. And the reason we're doing that is because of the materials we've got. So we've got a whole wide range of materials that we use, and that's filling the need of each student, as it were, and it's making parents happy because they're seeing their students do well, and the students themselves are feeling good because they're improving at school. So like I said, it starts and ends with the student, and we have the tools at First Class Learning to be able to do that. And I think that's the numbers say it for themselves. The fact that we've got over 300 centres now. Like, I think me and Shanti sometimes look at it and think, wow, we're massive now compared to when we first started.
Well, I think the absolute latest numbers are about 340. So if you started with a 40, there's a 300 on top of when you started. So that is a big growth. A couple of years back now, the marketing team worked on identifying what are kind of really the main First Class Learning strengths. We're going to talk a little bit about each one, because I think it's much easier to grow and be a successful business if you have a clear, strong sort of brand understanding and positioning. And if you perhaps go back to when you started, perhaps they didn't have the same brand understanding and clarity we have now, but so we'll talk about that. I think one of the things that the brand position spoke about to start with was the smart materials, or what makes our materials so smart in terms of how flexible, adaptable, things like that, and why they're so effective. Because ultimately we are a materials-based tuition program, so stands to reason we have to have fantastic materials. So let's talk a little bit about, we've touched on it already, let's do a bit more detail. What can we do with our materials? How do they help every child? How are we able to help a primary child and a secondary child? How do we help children that are struggling, but also children who are high achievers, and we can help them even more? That's a big thing. So our materials must do an enormous job.
Yeah, I think firstly is the diagnostic testing.
Yeah.
And just working out where that child is at, because you can then draw on the correct resources. You know exactly where you're going to be starting from, so you can hit the ground running, and you can then also use it, and you can use other resources to measure the progress of each individual child. So I think the diagnostics tests are essential just to get things started. And then we've already talked about having different modules that we can draw on in terms of trying to get the right one for the child.
Well, I remember when I started thinking, really, we can do anything from year 4 to year 16, and it took me a while to truly believe that was possible.
Yeah.
But age 4 to 16,
age 4
to year with
age
reception
16,
to year 11. But expanding on what you're sort of saying is that when we started with First Class Learning at the beginning to compare to now, obviously the modules have really grown. We've got a lot more modules than we had before, but we've cleverly picked out, I think First Class Learning has cleverly picked out the key bits for maths and English at the moment. I know we're coming on to science as well, but maths and English, we've picked out the key parts that are going to help children, because there's a lot of stuff in the national curriculum where if you don't get the core, you can't do these other fluffy bits, if you like. So you've got to get the core bits, whether it's for maths and English, and you've got to get that solidified. And I think that's where First Class Learning is really different to a lot of other tuition centres out there, especially if you get a private tutor who opens their book and says, right, I'm going to teach you that, which is more of the same, whereas we're going to do the diagnostic, the assessment, and say, right, okay, look, you know what, you're in year 7, but you don't know your times tables. How are you going to do algebra or quadratic equations or whatever? How are you going to do that if you don't know your times tables? If you need to learn your times tables. So let's work on that, and also work on some of the other bits, but we can get right into the nitty gritty of it all. And I think that's really separated us, and that's one of the reasons why we've our materials are great, but why we've really grown as well.
I think also we are we emphasise writing. We're not online, and
we're just going to go on to that. So the next thing, so we've got the smart materials. We spoke about how flexible and the details, but actually we're not an online based learning system, and there are other sort of tuition brands, and I think lockdown showed, possibly the world, but certainly showed parents perhaps online learning can work for some children. I wouldn't say it doesn't work at all, but it's a challenge. So we're a print-based learning system, and that's something else that sort of our brand is one of the 4 crown jewels as we talk about the positionings around. So you started to talk about that, James. Let's just think about what is the benefit of us being all materials-based, print-based, and it's not only the blue worksheets. We talk about the handbooks, everything we do. So let's just have a talk about how we feel that that's so important. Perhaps examples of how we know that that's helped students.
Well, I know from parents is they like to see their pupils' work, firstly.
True.
So when their kids do their work online and it goes off into the ether and they don't get a chance to kind of just see how they're getting on, are they comfortable with the work, are they finding it difficult, is it too easy? So as a parent, it's quite nice to physically see how your child is getting on. What I would say, interestingly, is at the school I work at, we're introducing a software program that is going to be monitoring homework. So the homework is online, but what they've had to install into it is what they call a workbook checker, because they know that the impact of writing down your working is so important that they have to do that as an online platform. And so I found that interesting that, in this case, as an online platform, recognising the importance of having to write your work down. And in terms of remembering what you're doing, in terms of learning, I think there's quite a lot of research that says that it's really, really important.
We even do that as adults, don't we? Sometimes if I need to do something, I'll write it down. And I think there's science about that written commitment, that how your brain sort of processes that. And Fraser often talk to parents about at school, sometimes they sort of learn today and forget tomorrow, and we want them to learn today and remember forever. And I think one way of learning today and remembering forever is to go through repetitive practice, but you're writing things down. That commitment to pen and paper, I think, makes a big difference. Do you think parents understand that and value that?
I think one of the things that I made flippant comments about, especially since the COVID episode that we had, was just get off screen. Yeah. Just that, get off screen. I haven't met a parent yet that says, actually, I want more screen time.
No,
I want to find that parent that says, I wish my children were on screen a little bit longer than they are. It's the opposite, isn't it? No. And so when we sort of say we're pencil paper and we come in and you do the work, and then you do it every day, you do a little bit every day, and you progress and you get assessed again, and it's all pencil paper. The majority of parents really value that, and they can see the benefit of it. And the other thing I sort of say as well is that exams, whether it's SATs or your GCSEs, they're pencil paper. They're not. They're not online yet.
The number of parents have said, because a lot of parents have actually come to us and say their children are doing fine in school, but when they actually sit a test, they panic. They don't do well in tests. So when we say, that's because they do a lot of online learning, they're doing a lot of online tuition. When they come to us, it's all pen to paper. They do a number of tests before and after a module, so they're getting used to that practice. It's sometimes a 3-minute test, 5-minute test, but they sit there. They're doing so many tests throughout their modules that they work through with us, that it's become second nature to them. When they're at school, they do a test, they don't have that panic anymore, and it's helped so many kids.
Yeah, definitely. Even not just the assessments, even the day-to-day homework that we give, we ask them to write their time. So you're not under time pressure, but how long did you take to do those 2-3 pages that you had to do? And did it take you 20 minutes? Did it take you 10 minutes? But as soon as you sort of say, look, be aware of it, it tends to be, a lot of the children will make it into a bit of competition. Can they do it quicker than the day before? That sort of thing. And it just
without rushing skills. But but it's something we've not really loosely mentioned, but also we've then got the handbook. So as well as doing that, so they're doing that each day and keeping a track of how long it took, did it take 10 minutes, etc. But actually to mark it and actually to learn from marking. So I think if you're doing it online and the computer marks it for you, and you got 15 out of 20, but you didn't go through the process of ticking the ones you got right, seeing what you got wrong. So I think to learn through that, so all the, we often think about the materials of the blue worksheet, but the handbooks, I think they're crucial as well. And I'd say to a parent, it's not because we're lazy and we don't want to mark it, we're going to check it at the centre anyway, but that's part of the learning process. Do you think parents get that the marking's part of the learning process?
I think with the parents that I speak to, there's some parents that you need to maybe educate the value of it, and others get it straight away and they're with it. But I think the philosophy or the ethos of it is that you want the student to own their education.
Brilliant.
And if they own their education, if they own it, they own their learning.
Ownership. That's right. Exactly.
And they say, right, I've got pride in this homework that I'm going to do, and I want to understand it. And then when I mark it, why did I get that wrong? Not just a cross, but why? Where was my mistake? What was it? Was it a mathematical mistake, just a silly mistake, or did I actually get something something, technically wrong with that, that piece. And I think as soon as you sort of say, look, own your education, and you see from a 5-year-old who's not going to own their education because they're just told to do it and they just do it, up to like when you get to 14, 15, and you can see the difference when they own their education.
Life skill as well.
Exactly, and you can see the ones that own their education, whatever they do in their life, they're gonna be in charge of it, Whereas the ones that want to be spoon-fed all the time, slightly different.
Because I've done one-to-one tuition when I was younger, and I've, obviously with first-class learning, and essentially that transition from one-to-one, I was a bit worried about potentially that when you're sitting down the whole time, and there's definitely a place for one-to-one tuition. But I was a bit worried about that. But actually I saw that a lot of parents and we're using this word ownership, to have their kids take ownership of their work and to be proud of their work. And this is setting up life skills for when they need to prepare for their GCSEs or future exams or their SATs, whatever it might be. And it's just a life skill. And I must say as well, a lot of the kids like it. When I go round to their home, and it's always such a privilege to go into someone's home, to meet them, to sit down, have a bit of quality time. Quite often mum and dad will go, I know how to teach maths, it's just with family dynamics, they won't listen to me. And I say, right, this is going to, when you come back and you do your little bit every day, this is down to you. And the kids are empowered and they're keen. It can be very powerful.
Yeah, I think you picked an important point there, because the other value of having our centres is when the child comes to there, that it's independent from the parents, it's away from the parents, and it's another place to go to study. It's outside of school as well, so it's a slightly different environment. You also see other children, and you'll see, if you're a 6-year-old, you'll see a 4-year-old, and you might see an 8-year-old either side of you who are sitting around you, and you'll be around and you say, oh right, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's not that you're comparing, but you'll just see different age groups, and we see like 13-year-olds, and they sometimes might be being tutored by a uni student or something, and they'll look up to the uni student thinking, wow. And that'll be inspiring and motivation for them to say, I want to get to that as well. So there's all these other cross dynamics that you see as well, all these different things, and I think that helps build confidence. That you might not get necessarily in a classroom environment or in a one-to-one situation.
I think you're right, and I've had feedback from parents, I'd say more for the younger kids, maybe who might be in year 2 or year 3, sitting with a year 6 or year 7 or year 8, and there's that model of behaviour, they're modelling that work ethic, and they can see these guys are working for their exams or to achieve a score in a test, or just to improve themselves. It doesn't have to be for an assessment, but that's all getting modelled to these children, and they like being around older kids. It makes them feel grown up.
So there's quite a wide range of things there. But if we just look at the first 2 things we've discussed, the smart materials instead of print-based learning, some of the conversation I often have with a parent is we're going to improve them in core skills, be it maths, English and science, which you'd expect. I use a phrase about being an expert learner, and what does that mean? I've never heard that. Well, I use the word an expert learner. We'll give them discipline, organisation, learn how to work from mistakes, learn how to then sometimes learn on their own, and these are all things that, as we've said, are life skills. And when you start talking to a parent that we're able to do that as first class learning, I'm not sure every other tuition provider would be able to genuinely say that, but I think we're not just saying that because of how good we are, we're actually saying that because of the materials and programmes we've got. So one of the other points I wanted to move on to, we've touched on it. So you mentioned the sort of assessment we give. We tend to refer to it more as a skills assessment. We used to talk about it as a diagnostic. We think of it more of a skills assessment. There's some flexibility how each centre runs, and that's one of the benefits of first class learning. It's not you have to do it this way, but there's the core stability of how it runs. I think it's one of our most important assets, really, the skills assessment. So we just spend a few minutes talking about your experiences of, because I think in this room now we all do it slightly differently. I do it at home, I think you guys do it at the centre. So there's not a right and wrong way of doing that, because you can do that how you want, but nonetheless it's a massively powerful tool, isn't it?
Yeah, we when we first started, we did the assessments at home, but
at the students'
at the students' home. But I think once our centres were running quite well, we started to do them in the centres. But yeah, it's a very powerful tool. Not only does it ascertain which sort of module you start the child on, it makes it very easy to implement the materials in that sense, but it also, when you show the parents just where their child is at, it's just sometimes the parents are just amazed, thinking, okay, I didn't know this, and you've got all this material in front of them saying this is how they have scored. It just opens up so much information for them, and then you can talk to them about how we can help them, what materials we have, and it just shows the sort of route that we'll be going.
So one of the things I particularly wanted to ask you, James, is obviously your experience of being in a school as well, as to, we sometimes have situations where a parent would say, and I'm sure you guys have had the same, that, oh, you've told me more than I hear from school. And I say, to be fair to the school, they've got a class of 30. I'm looking at your individual little Johnny, whoever it may be. Now you're seeing both sides of it. It'd be interesting to see your take on that as to where the skills assessment and what detail you can get about a child. But thinking about, if only you could possibly have that level of detail about a child, but it's going to be impossible. You're doing your absolute best, but you've got a class of 25, maybe 30 kids.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, what I'm going to do is just confirm what you just said, really. When you're dealing with so many kids, to give feedback, and you want to give feedback to parents, but they're just, it's impossible. And the demands on teachers are, incredible. I mean, they're, all the people I know have hearts of gold. They absolutely love their kids. They really care for the parent, but they just can't do it. And so, but then being the other side of it, and parents generally recognise that. They look at their children's teachers and also just think they're brilliant, but also when it's your own child, you just want to know more. And quite often you send your child into school each day and you think they're all right, but you don't really know. And then sometimes you might just be like, I'm not sure. Or quite often you might go as a parent and say, I'm just a bit worried about their maths. And sometimes they feel that they're just not quite listened to, because as a teacher you're saying, no, they're fine. Whereas actually they might not be. Or there might be other children, generally the ones who get the attention are the ones who might be difficult or tricky, whereas your child might be, middle of the class or below, but just not quite in that bracket to have the conversation with the parent. So that's one of the things that parents, in my feedback as a first class learning centre manager, that's been one of the constant feedback, and the relief from parents, and also to see with the skills assessment, go, right, here we go, like you can see.
So as a teacher, from the skills assessment, you're really pleased then how much detail you can give.
Yeah, absolutely. And the breadth, because it's broken down into different topics, and then the breadth within each one. So I don't know if it's an algebra module, it's the skills assessment will cover a few different aspects of that. So immediately you can say, right, they're understanding this aspect, but they're really not understanding this aspect and this aspect. Maybe some's right, some's wrong. But as a parent as well, they can find that really helpful. And it also allows you, as you're going through the programme with the child, is using it as a point of reference with the parent who's seen it at the beginning as well, and understands why you do.
I'm not sure whether all tuition, one-to-one tutors or tuition franchises do it, but to me, I can't see how. We talk a lot about personalised tuition, and we absolutely genuinely do that. How could you possibly do that if you didn't have a really powerful skills assessment?
No, you've got to do. I mean, what I wanted to add on to what you were saying, James, is one of the reasons I left teaching. I was in there for 2 years, and it was because I couldn't give each child what I wanted to give, and the system just didn't allow me. Like you sort of said, when you've got 25, 30 children, you can't get into that much depth, and there's a core that would be fine, but it's like some on this side and some on that side where you're not really having the time and the energy to sort of deal with that, and there was this like hollowness about it. And when I then joined first class learning, it kind of fulfilled that. It kind of, as a manager, it's like, you know what, I can know so much about each child, and the reason I can know so much about each child is, go back to what you just said, it's your skills assessment, you know. So you've got a whole sequence of assessments you can do, and the beautiful thing about this assessment as well is that you can take the age out of it for a second. You can say, right, okay, you know what, it doesn't matter what age you are, let's just do these assessments. Let's see where you are on these first class learning materials for maths or for English. Let's see where you are, and then let's see where we need to go. So you might have a year 4 or year 5 child who's flying, and you can push them. Yeah. Why not? Because the parents will be happy with that, saying, you know what, they're ahead of where they need to be. Let's do this and let's do that with them.
Let's keep them stimulated so they don't lose interest.
Because they're hungry. So let's feed them, and you can do that. In the school, you can't. You have to follow the curriculum. You're year 4, you will learn year 4 curriculum. That's all you'll do. But you can do that with first class learning. And then the flip side, you get someone who's into year 8, year 9, and really struggling with something. Then you can get to the roots of it, and then the assessment can even say to the child and say to the parent, look, I've found this little gap, this little hole, and I can now, or with the materials, we can fill that gap. That should make you fly. It should sort a few things out if we can fill this little gap. And that's where I think first class learning is so unique, because looking at a lot of other tuition companies out there, or even private tutoring, if you said to me, private tutor a child, now that the knowledge I've got with all these skills I can do, I would do it so differently to what I would have done 15, 20 years ago, where it would have been, you're year 4, here's a year 4 book, let's teach you year 4 stuff. It's not really necessarily the right way to go about it, and I firmly believe that even more now, having sort of spent 12, 13 years of doing this.
Also, just with the skills assessment, I think it's really important that we show the parents the scores, not just at the beginning when we're assessing the child when they're enrolling, but we do this regularly at our centre. Every time we're in a session, I'll always have a test, because the child's finished a module, and it not only makes the child just feel, wow, I've just finished a module, and you always see a significant improvement pre and after test. And if I can see the parents come to pick the child up, always will show them that test.
We send you on WhatsApp.
We do it all the time, and it's just such an amazing thing.
It happened actually on Tuesday. There was actually Moise, I think he's year 5. The mum was really worried about their son, and we'd assessed him at the beginning. We put him on the correct module. He finished the module. We assessed him again. Massive improvement. I think the first time around was 8 out of 30, and then he got up to 28 out of 30 or
and
something.
It just makes the child feel amazing, the parent.
And then when you showed the child, look, this was you. Look at the date. It was 3 months ago, 2 months ago. Look at you now. Look at what you've done. Look at what you've achieved. And
they sometimes look at that pre-test and think, is that what I scored? Is that what I did a few months ago?
Did I not know that? Did I not know that? Oh my God. But then the confidence is just soars.
So it's 4 points that was really part of the brand position. We've covered smart materials, we've covered print-based learning, we've covered the skills assessment, we've touched on it, but I want to just go into a little bit more detail about being aligned to the UK national curriculum. We just need to be clear with that I think it's massively important. I want to hear you guys talk about that in particular. But just to clarify for our audience, that doesn't mean on a day-to-day basis we will be doing with your child what they're also going to be doing at school. That's not what aligns to the UK national curriculum. So all schools, I believe, I'm right in saying, that sort of might go through things in a slightly different order. They'll follow the year 3 curriculum or the year 4, but it won't all be taught the same, either the same way or in exactly the same order. But just being aligned means that if you think long term, we will make sure we've covered that. So let's just talk about that, the importance of being within the UK national curriculum. We just need to be clear what we're saying, that it's not day to day.
I just want to preempt with what you've just said there, in that in this country tuition isn't regulated. So anyone can call themselves a tutor. Anyone can. They can advertise themselves as a tutor, and it's just not regulated. So you can't be a dentist or a doctor or an optician without having the qualifications, but you can be a tutor. Anyone can. Our dog could probably ask himself to be a tutor and say, what for? But anyone, I'm saying anyone can do that, and I think that's not right, because if you're teaching a curriculum from somewhere else which teaches different methods, that only causes confusion. And what I say to parents is, why teach your child, for example, Spanish, but then give them a French exam? Why would you do that? That's not going to do anything. So being aligned with the national curriculum, it's a shame it's not regulated, but to me that would be a criteria of being regulated. Absolutely, absolutely. Especially in the UK, if if you want to do that, so you've got to, and your point about, I think if you follow the national curriculum, and then that means the year 4 child gets year 4 work, I think you're missing something there, because that might not be what that child needs. Absolutely. So that goes against what I believe first class learning is. But whatever you teach that child has to be in the national curriculum. So you shouldn't be teaching something that's not in the national curriculum.
Or a different method.
Or a different method, yeah, exactly. That's, you know, so the method has to be, or the, you know, whatever the learning is, that's got to be in the national curriculum. But it might be 2 years before, it might be 2 years later, whenever it is. But that doesn't matter. At least it's all in there.
Yeah, it's all relevant, isn't it? All our materials, it's all relevant.
So you touched on that, James, obviously from a teaching background. That was really important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd also say is, I know that you've worked in schools, and looks like I'm going to be working in schools and potentially taking some intervention. Now, if we weren't aligned to the curriculum, there's no ways we'd be allowed to work in schools.
So just to clarify, we're not talking about as in you as an individual work as a teacher. What we're saying is there is the ability as a first class learning centre to go into a school, to be invited into a school. You've been invited into a school, not you going to them, and take intervention classes for children that behind you. Our
Using
materials are strong enough.
So for me, it would looking like starting as a summer club for year 10s who their maths teacher was on maternity leave, so they've had a supply teacher in. So the headmaster just over the summer wants to sort of give them a boost before year 11. But then come September, they're looking at trying to utilise the first class learning programme in year 7, because they don't want to wait till year 10 or 11. They want the effects of it to be felt throughout the school, through a pupil's learning journey. So yes, and going back, if it wasn't based on the national curriculum, there's no chance we would.
Well, that's a massive feather in the cap of first class learning, that schools are recognising how good it is, as they would not be asking first class learning managers to come in, would they?
Yeah. Well, we will be nearly 10 years in schools, and we've worked with probably about 5 or 6 local schools now, and we've been in schools for coming up to 10 years. And I think the last group we had was 60 children, and we used to do them in the morning, and they were actually timetabled in their timetable. So they were taking them out of non-core lessons to bring them to a first class learning, and they were in 20s, groups of 20s. And the fact that the school actually felt, you know what, we can take them out of PE or drama or whatever else and give them a bit of maths or English intervention, because we know what you're going to do. And each child again was uniquely assessed, you know, with the school's diagnostic, and then given an individual program that we do, and then we show them the results. And we wouldn't be able to say we've been there for 10 years if first of all it wasn't aligned to national curriculum, but more importantly, it wasn't showing progress. Yeah, that's probably the key part as well.
So I think the brand identified some of them 4 key points. We talk about sort of from a brand perspective as the crown jewels, but there's a lot more to first class learning. Yes, there's a few other bits I wanted to be able to discuss. I very much think we answer the needs of parents. We answer the needs of the family. I think that's also important. Sometimes I think it's all just about the child, but it's answering the needs of the family. So the first one I want to talk about, a very important part of first class learning, is to learn something every day. And I think that really transforms their learning. So bite-sized daily homework. Being realistic, does a child do it every single day? But we try and cover that. But let's just have a talk about that. I think that's a really big difference. We talk about what can we offer a child that school doesn't give. Well, bite-sized daily learning, I think, is the key to that. Is that something you sort of, everybody's got schedules, we've got plan, don't we? So that's another big driver, I think, that parents really buy into.
I'd say yes. Like you say, in practice it can be tricky. I think it's really important that families get into that rhythm. The fact is, so many families are so busy with, other clubs, and so it's trying to do a little bit every day. Maybe it's a bit more, every other day, or whatever works for the child. But also, what we don't want, and you get a slightly sheepish child coming as if they've tried to do it all last minute, the night before, and actually it doesn't work. They're worried because they know they haven't done it. But I talk about a rhythm or a routine that our families get into, and they come. They come to the centre. They're welcomed. They get on with their personalised learning, and they take it home. And then at home, they've got their routines where they're trying to do a little bit every day. But there is
I think that's the key. They're into routine. They learn at the centre, but to learn every day, that's what the routine's there for, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's that reinforcing what they've learnt at the centre. It's that little and often approach.
Yes.
So you're not bombarding them at the centre, for a whole hour or 2 hours, like sort of the old-fashioned tuition. You do a little bit at the sort of introduction to a new topic, and then obviously you mark it, do your corrections, all of that. But it's just enough for the child to understand. But then they take the booklet home. It might be 10 minutes, might be 15 minutes, but you're reinforcing, consolidating what they've learnt at the centre, and that really works. That's why when you do assess them again at the end of the module, they've it's all there. They've remembered it all, and it works.
Well, it's that phrase, isn't it? Learn today, remember forever. You're not going to do that if you just do something every now and then. So.
I think that there's a whole list of benefits for parents really, and going on, expanding on what Shanti just said there as well. There's something on memory and recall as well.
Yes.
So you put something in your memory, and if you do it for an hour on that day and then don't do it again for another week, there's a strong chance, especially the younger children, they're going to forget.
Yeah.
But if you do a little bit every day and you keep using a recall, and I almost sort of say imagine there's a recall cable from your, someone that asks you at the front of your brain, and there's a back of your brain where the memory, you've stored the memory, and there's a cable in the middle. You're strengthening that muscle, that cable, you're strengthening it, and then it just makes things a bit better. And sometimes when you improve that part of a child's brain, if you like, other sides of their academia improves as well. So if you help the maths and the English, suddenly other subjects improve and everything else gets better as well. So you're improving a lot of other things by just doing a little and often.
But that recall is something, again, we do in school, and it's recognised in terms of having starters, 3 or 4 questions. It has to be, for us it was one last term, one last month, one last week.
Right.
But it's it's going back to it because, like you say, the studies show that recall, the more times you revisit it, the more or the longer you can retain it for. Yeah. Whereas if you just do it once and never come back to it, then you're going to be struggling.
Yeah. I mean, you sort of said about, like, when you were first talking, you were talking about parents, and obviously there's this little and often side of it. But what parents are getting at, if a child comes to us, is we've got that unique individualised program we're going to give to the child, but we're going to create independent learners, we're going to create hungry learners, we're going to create that routine, we're going to create a bit of, like you said, the rhythm as well. So you're going to create all these different study skills, if you like, and life skills without you realising, and sometimes when you say to a parent, it's actually a little bit every day, and that's better for them rather than to do it all in one go. And sometimes I'll sort of say to the child, and the child will look at me and go, well, I've got to do some work every day. I go, well, look, you don't brush your teeth all on a Sunday, do you, for the week, and get it out of the way? You do it, hopefully twice a week, twice a day. Twice a week.
Twice a week,
but hopefully you do it twice a day, and you brush your teeth as you go along. You don't get it all done on in one go. And I often use that analogy and sort of say, look, do a little bit every day. It'll help you, and it'll improve your recall skills. It'll improve your confidence. It'll improve how you feel. And then when you especially show them the results, to say, look, this is what you've done. It's working for you. And the majority of children, it does work for.
A lot of them get, I think, children do lots of sports now as well, so I use sports analogy. So every boy, if it's a boy, they're into football, we would say to them, who's your favourite player, and they'll make up a player, and you'll say the same story, whoever it is, but it would be like, whoever that is, Mason Mount, whoever they like.
Not Harry Maguire. Do you get Harry Maguire?
No. Whoever their player, and you'd say to them, so they have training, nearly every day, but I'd be willing to bet he's the penalty taker, or he takes free kicks. He's the one that's prepared to stay behind and do a little bit more. Are you prepared to do a little bit more? And he's doing that every day. So when he stands up to a match, he doesn't think twice about taking the penalty. Oh, right, so I can get one right. So sometimes I think it's a bit of a challenge to think to the student to do something every day, but we just know how powerful that is. We've just got to kind of persuade them. I want to just touch on, we've covered this already, but the progress tests. So we do pre and post tests. I think that's really key. But also, I think through doing progress tests, sometimes we would go over a module. So if somebody's done a progress test and they haven't picked it up first go, that's another beauty of first class learning. It's not I feel, as from what I remember of school and friends at teachers and talk about school, it is going to go at the same pace. Whether the child is right or quite ready for that, they may get interventions and as help as best they can, but it's challenging. Whereas the progress test can think, let's go over that. Actually, let's have a break from that. We'll go back to that. So, progress tests, is that really another key thing to be able to make sure we're doing the best for each student?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, regular sort of assessment sounds a bit formal, but tests is slightly softer. It's just a way of monitoring progression and checking the child's understanding. So, I think they can be kind of soft touch, so to speak. Sometimes people get a bit sort of anxious about tests, but I think my pupils, once they kind of get used to it and familiar with it and the routines that we have, it's just a way of really being on top of the pupils.
Okay.
I think what I've found sort of over the years is once a child's been with us a while, they actually look forward to the tests in a funny sort of way.
Because they show what they can do, don't they?
Exactly. They go in with confidence, and that's, they've overcome that initial anxiety and what's this environment and all that, which you might get for a new student for the first few months. But once they've been with us for a while, they're like, okay, I've done this module. I trust that I've done it every day. I've done it properly. Let me now show you what I can do. Let's go for it. Because you know what? This is going to go back to my parents, and I'm going to be like liked for a few days at least.
I can remember, this is going to sound odd, but I can remember on my GCSEs, a family member gave me the idea that you go into your GCSEs as a chance to show what you've been doing, and I did work quite hard and I did okay, and that always stayed with me. And I think we've got some students now that not only are keen to do the test, they're chasing me within days for the results of the test, and that shows that's kind of a really, really strong position that you've given them that passion to show that they're learning.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we do as well is that they get a good result, and then they've got their initial result, which is obviously not as good, and then they've got their result just now, which is really good. Do you want me to tell your parents, or should we just keep it between us? Should we just keep a little secret between us, or shall we tell parents? Yeah. And then they'll always say, yeah, no, tell parents, of course, like that. So then you go, okay.
Some of them will take photos. If
they've got their own phone, they'll take pictures.
They'll say, let me take a picture before and after that.
Well, I often say to them, take a picture on your phone, here's before and after, or we'll send pictures as well, to parents and
such
stuff.
a powerful tool.
And it's just by the way, your child's done really well. Let them have dinner tonight.
Well, that's one of the last few bits I wanted to go on, which summarises that about creating an inspiring learning centre. And I very much think that we're all passionate here about helping our students, but the centre itself has to be inspiring them, because if you don't, you could force them to come to study, but that doesn't necessarily mean the information is going in the brain. So how do you sort of inspire children at your learning centres that they keep coming back?
Well, I think you're going to the heart of what I think is a good teacher or a good learning environment, which is relationships.
Yeah.
Really getting to know each kid. There's sort of, I remember tutoring a kid, and the feedback to mum was that James gets me. So you can get your kids and they can understand you.
Yeah.
Then they'll want to come. And so if you can marry someone who can build those relationships with those pupils and their parents, along with the resources that are powerful, then I think you're on to a winner.
Yeah.
But I just think relationships are so important.
Yeah.
I think also the materials, when you've enrolled a child and when they first start with you, they kind of, it's not like, I really don't want to be here. The materials, it builds on their self-esteem. And I think because it's an individualized program, they feel, I can do this. They do a little bit, it's okay. Yeah. Because when they first come, you hear them say, I can't do maths, or I can't do this, I'm so not good at this. But because it's an individualized program, they start where they should be starting. And when you start filling in those little gaps, you just build, on their confidence, self-esteem, and then they're inspired, like, I can do this.
Yeah, I think also in our centres especially as well, is that we've got a lot of tutors, and a lot of them are uni students, and we kind of train them to just be relaxed and to have a bit of banter as well, and to have a bit of banter with the child, which is get to know the child and have a little bit of fun, and don't make it all strict and rigid and like a tuition centre where you're not allowed to talk and not lift your head up or anything like that. We try and make it a bit relaxed, so it's different to school. So I think that's a big part of it as well, and also, like you said, James, as well, to get to know something about them as well, where you can have that sort of relationship where you can talk about something that they did last week, and you can carry that on.
Humour is so important in terms of just getting children involved, and in Ofsted, you don't have a category for humour. Yeah. there isn't one. Yeah. And you could I think as a teacher, if you can not take yourself too seriously, or just say something that's relevant, or even if you spend 30 seconds or a minute just catching up on what the children have been doing and a little joke or whatever it might be, that 1 minute is really important. Whereas there'll be quite a lot of schools that don't like that because you're off topic.
You absolutely lose the child though. You could do, but no, I think you're so right, because what I do say to a lot of parents and a lot of children once I get to know them, I suppose, is banter releases serotonin in your brain. If you release serotonin in your brain, you're more likely to learn. So there's that as well. So you're going to have a little bit of banter, have a bit of a joke. I'll tell them something that's not funny or something. But our manager, who runs a few of our centres, she actually puts a riddle on each, because our tutors get like a checklist, and there's a little riddle that she has, and she'll sort of say to the tutor then has to say to the students, oh, this is today's riddle, do you know what the riddle is? Now that's taking them off topic, something different, but it's just expanding the brain in a different way, making you think of something else, something outside of what you're normally going to do.
Sometimes educational riddles.
That's right. Sometimes there was I think there was one about what colours are blue house is made of blue bricks, a red house is made of red bricks. What is the greenhouse and the greenhouse is made of
glass.
There you go. So I think that was this week's one or something. But there's always something, and then that becomes a little bit of a talking point, a bit of banter and what have you. But it's important for learning as well, and that just and we try to do that in our centres, not to keep it so formal.
Interestingly enough, I do discovery days, and I had a candidate, this is pre-COVID when they used to come to the centre, and she came in and she said a number of times, she just was looking around and she said, the children are so happy here. She said...
Why she seemed surprised?
Yeah, she said it 2 or 3 times, they're just so happy here. And then obviously she must have seen the confusion in my face, and she said, it's just that I told my friend I was coming for a discovery day in the hope of buying a tuition centre, and she did sign up. And she said that her friend had said, oh, why do you want to buy a tuition business? We used to hate going to tuition. So everyone's perception of tuition is very different, but I always think it's the way the programme is structured, the way we run our centres, it just, happy children learn better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy children, I mean, that really brings us to the end of this. One of the sort of the brand team created as a position statement is to build skilled, confident, motivated learners, and I think that's the package that we've just been discussing, today. Literally, the last point I want to touch on is as amazing things that we can do in first class learning, but there is some flexibility in how we run that, and it's about getting a work-life balance. And I think if we don't get a work-life balance, and possibly James, you might want to lead on this, perhaps people who are teachers who are exhausted aren't getting a work-life balance, but first class learning enables that to happen, so therefore you're able to run an inspiring learning centre, you keep children engaged, and you're not feel like you're flogged to death like perhaps many teachers feel.
Yeah, 100%. I think that I've chatted to various friends and other people, and obviously it's a business, so there's financial implication, but for me, I say the biggest thing is, the quality of life I have, the ownership of everything is building something's incredible. Also learning all the new skills that you need to know for a little business, being able to pop out for a coffee, but also there are times where I suppose I'm quote unquote working and it doesn't feel like working. So let's say I'm meeting a university student who might come and join me at the centre, and I'm having a coffee with them and just getting to know them. For me and my teacher, that's not work. But it is work. But unless I'm rushing between lessons, I've got 30 kids in front of me. There's so many times where I have to sort of just kind of go, this is work, but it doesn't feel like work. Well, why is that? Because I'm not, I'm not really stressed, or I'm just not frantic.
I know you guys are really sort of work-life balance is key for you guys as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah, I think it's a very rewarding job because you're doing something so. It's very rewarding where you're teaching children, you're seeing them, improve, excel, building on their confidence. So I find it very satisfying. But I'm not working all the hours God sends either. Financially, we're fine, but I get a lot of time to myself. I think I work part-time really, but
Yeah.
What I also really like is, I guess I'm dependent on these families really for my income, but they're dependent on me. So rather than just getting your monthly salary that comes in, you're running this local business for local community, local children, local families, but you're both dependent on each other. And I love that. There's a sort of vulnerability about that. But also a sense of such importance.
Making a difference.
Yeah. And,
So rewarding.
Really rewarding. And also the people who come are from completely different backgrounds, and the sacrifices that some parents make to, help their children. It's a real privilege.
Absolutely.
But it's so rewarding. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think for me, there was a quote that I must have read 10, 15 years ago. Find something you're passionate about and see if you can get paid to do it. And in a way, for me, this is what first class learning is. And I think from a franchise, overall from a franchise perspective, it's up to you what you want to do with it. You've got this like business in the box, if you like. So this is what it is. This is how you do it. And then how large do you want to go? How many students do you want? How often do you want to be open? How many staff do you want to employ? It's all up to you how you want to shape it. If you want hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children and lots of staff, and you want to be open loads of times a week, do it. If you just want to be open a couple of times a week and just run at something that's
Lots
a bit more sort of steady in a way, and then it can fit around your own sort of lifestyle. So there's some people who've got other part-time work and they're just doing this. That's fine. And there's others like us who, there's two of us doing this. We say full-time, but it's not really full-time for us. But we're able to do it, and we get satisfaction out of it. And I think when I'm at the centre, I can't remember any time when I felt like, oh, this is hard work. Yeah, okay, you have your little moments here and there, but majority of the time, I'd say over 90% of the time, I can't remember it feeling like, oh my God, it's work.
So I think that's a perfect place we can end to sort of talk about why we're the fastest growing tuition franchise by thinking about find something you feel passionate about and get paid to do it. I think that's the perfect summary. So we've covered a lot there. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we will inspire other keen people to become tuition franchise owners as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.